I will brief everyone on a few things. All participants will be muted during the webinar. The only faces you will see and hear would be from the speaker and our team of BrainFit panelists. The profile of our panelists can be found on our website. Kindly note that there will be a Q&A towards the end of the session, a live Q&A. As there are a big number of participants tonight, our speaker might not be able to address all the questions. Yes, in fact, we even received some questions prior to the webinar. However, you still may post, please do post your questions under the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen anytime during the session, and our team of panelists will try our best to answer. We have come to the end of the introduction. Please relax and enjoy the webinar for the next hour. I will now pass on the spotlight to our founder, Ms. Cheryl Chia. Thank you.
So much, Nancy. Thank you. All right, just let me share sound. And we are recording this session, am I correct? Yes, so that it will be available in case some of us are not able to join. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. Tonight, we will be talking about an extremely common complaint nowadays, I think, from both parents and educators, and that's regarding the increasingly shorter attention span that we see in our children. Before we get into the topic, just some quick slides for introduction. If you're meeting for the very first time, you're new to BrainFit, my name is Cheryl. I am a physical therapist, and I'm the founder of BrainFit as well. And you can see from some of the information on the slide, I'm based in Singapore, and I've got now close to 30 years of brain training experience now, and I've also been a lecturer. I do a lot of training and speaking, also a proud mother to 2 girls, and I've also authored a book. And I always say that is the mothering part of my experience that has really driven home the important message of the brain for me personally, right? Because all the theoretical concepts, I actually apply them, and because these are brains that are precious to me, and that's in my family, and that I'm raising myself. So tonight's sharing, again, it's with parents, and I know that educators among us as well. And we want to share what we believe is important brain information, so that hopefully it can help you in your parenting or your teaching journey as well. So BrainFit as an entity was founded in Singapore in 2001, so about 20 years now. And we have cognitive training programs in learning centers and partner schools all around these countries. So in Turkey, China, Philippines, Thailand, Malaysia, and Singapore, where I'm from, and of course, Indonesia. So you see our panelists that's supporting me. So we have an international group because of our work, outside of Singapore. So here you can see we offer enrichment programs through the centers. You can see some of the centers on this slide here. So our enrichment programs caters to babies as young as 9 months, and up to adult, and also senior people coming to us. We also run preschool, and that caters to the early years of 18 months to 6 years. These are some of our awards and some of our partners that we work with. Yeah, I won't go into that too much. And yes, our panelists. So you see different of them, and supporting the event this evening. I'm really grateful for the support. So if you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A panel, and our panelists will try and assist with that. And if you want more information about them and their backgrounds, you can see it on this link. Yeah. All right, I think that's enough for introduction. So let's get into the topic proper. Why is focus and paying attention so difficult? Now, I have prepared 3 main segments of information, all right, to try and address these questions. Of course, to understand why is it so hard, and hopefully to take away a few ideas and tips on what we as parents and teachers can do about it. So the first part, I want to talk about why does a child not pay attention, right? And we're going to do some polling, all right, to see what everyone thinks, and then to explore some of those options. We then want to go in and look at how does the brain actually pay attention? Because in order to understand why is it so hard, what is going on in the child's mind that, they just can't keep their mind, on that worksheet or, on that subject. So then we need to examine a little bit deeper, like what's taking up the effort, right? It's like, my child doesn't want to lift a weight, right? Like let's examine why is this weight, causing so much distress. So we want to examine that. And of course, we want to take home, a few strategies and also share with you in one of our strategies what are some of the solutions that we offer and the protocols, the ideas that we use and adopt and philosophies at BrainFit. All right. So first section, why does a child not pay attention? I have a poll here. So my question is, John has difficulty paying attention. Which option do you think would be the biggest reason? Again, no right and wrong, right? Just want to know the opinion of my audience. I'm going to launch the poll. There we go. Can you see the poll, right? So if you can participate, that will be great. So no right and wrong, John's genetic makeup, early childhood experiences, perhaps. John is not interested in the subject or studies in general, right? Interest and motivation. John has a learning difficulty, perhaps ADD, attention deficit disorder, or attention deficit hyperactive disorder. John lacks certain brain skills. So that would be another option. Yeah, thank you for your participation. Yeah, I'm seeing, we just wait a little bit more, right? And again, no right and wrong, right? It's just getting you involved in this conversation. Webinar is quite one way, yeah? It's kind of just me talking. So it's always nice to get some participation from the audience. All right, so we've got 70%. I'm going to end the poll right now, okay? And then we'll share and look at the results. There we go. Share the results. Okay, so nearly half of the audience here, right, that's about 42%, thinks it's an interest issue, interest and motivation. And again, when I run webinars, I might do teacher training, I ask the same question, right? And interest often comes up at the top, right, as the top idea, that people think is the key issue. So second here in the poll, you can see at 28%, some people think that John lacks certain brain skills. And then the next would be, perhaps John has a learning difficulty. So that's at 15%. 12% thinks it could be linked to what happened when he was very young. And 4% thinks it could be linked to a genetic makeup. Thank you so much for all your participation. Let's explore each of these options. John's genetic makeup. Now, a lot of people think that babies are born equal and with a clean slate, like a sponge, right? So the analogy is often used. Babies are like sponges and then they just absorb from whatever you give them and they learn. Science has now informed us that that is not true. Babies, unfortunately, or fortunate, I think it's more unfortunate. Individual differences already exist at birth. And this is because the genetic material, including genes for paying attention, right? In genes to learn math, for example, the genes would have expressed to form the baby's brain. Right, so we all inherit, genes from our parents and grandparents, right, and then we pass them to our babies. So the DNA then in the formation of the baby in the womb, right, the brain is being formed. So here I have a picture of the brain. It is taken from MIT, so it's a renowned university. You can see that the scientists actually color-coded different areas. Now, just to help you to orientate, this is the front of the brain. So the eyes are at the front, and this is the back. So the way you orientate is to look for this little bump at the bottom that usually sits at the back. Yeah. So you are looking at side view, front, back. So scientists color-coded different brain areas. I actually like to call them brain muscles. One of the discovery is that the brain behaves like a muscle. Right, so it can You can have strong areas and weak areas. Number one, in how it resembles a muscle, although brain cells are very different from muscle cells, right? But the behavior is very similar. So in that different areas, you can have, strong areas and weak areas, different fitness levels, and also different areas have different jobs, just like your abs, right? Your abdominals helps to, prop up your trunk, give you a good posture. Your biceps, your arms help you to lift, maneuver your limbs. Our brain has got different muscles, yeah, but again, they're not true muscles, but I think it's easier to imagine because our brain is often like a black box. So the way to understand it is like there are different classes of muscles. So in this picture, the MIT researchers color-coded them. For example, information for the eyes is yellow and orange. And we know that from the eyes and from your body influences math learning, for example. So it's here. Language learning is the white area. And focus and attention is actually the green and the maroon area at the front part of the brain. So when a baby is born, depending on what DNA the baby inherited, right, the brain would have already has its unique mark, right? Whether it's already stronger auditorily, right, that the brain is ready to receive language, or actually having a relative weakness that, for that child. So genes actually, it's important, and it does give us an impact in our behaviors, right? Classroom behaviors, learning behaviors. So that's the first point. So our genetic makeup, it affects, how John would pay attention. But that's not the end of the story, because if it is just the genes, then we wouldn't be here. Then it's quite, fatalistic. It's like, okay, that's who we are. It's what we have. That's just too bad if we don't have, what we need, right? So let's look at early childhood experiences. Now, are these important? Absolutely, as well. So again, I mentioned that there's no right and wrong. They all contribute in different ways. So the genes, we know, is the beginning of the story. Our babies have the brain, but then the environment, the experiences start to shape the brain as well. So early childhood is a period where the experiences are particularly important, because some of the brain connections that are formed can be very robust, right? Because the brain is naturally going through a rapid developmental phase in the first few years. So a great opportunity to build in strong, robust, healthy pathways, right? So the pathways are robust, but if you have an unhealthy environment, right, you also can have robust but unhealthy pathways. For example, we're talking about attention span, right? So, sorry, let me get back to that. So there's research that has shown that for children 0 to 3 years, each extra hour per day of TV time increases the risk of attention deficit disorder by 10% by age 7 years. So we're seeing what happens in the early years when the pathways that are laid down, right, are robust, strong, stubborn, all right, would be another word. So if you have stubborn, healthy pathways, that's great. I mean, it's a great asset. It's going to support you in the future. But if you have pathways that are laid down that are perhaps not as healthy, with TV watching, one of the concerns is the fast-moving screens, images, the fast sounds. It can be disorganizing for a young baby who's trying to make sense of the world, all right, who's trying to pay attention to different things and make sense of things. So we see that, by age 7, the risk of having attention issues actually goes up by, quite significant, right, 10%. And obviously we are in a much heavier gadget heavy kind of society now. Then when this research was done, this is actually not a very new research, but I think the environment has gotten even heavier in gadgets and screen. So not that the screen is bad and that, children just should not have screen time. I certainly, at the very 0 to 18 months, the advice is to stay away from that if possible. But beyond 18 months, right, the screen time can be positive, can have learning opportunities, but they just have to be really managed well, yeah? So yes, early childhood experiences could have contributed to John's difficulty in this question. How about interest, right? And of course, interest matters. We all know that, anyone who works with a child, has a child at home, or ourselves, right? If you're not interested in something, how do you pay attention and focus, especially for a long duration? However, let's dig deeper into interest itself. What forms interest? Many people think interest is a fixed personality. Like, you hear people talking about, oh, I'm not a book person, right? Or my child is not the sporty type. Yeah. So it is a type, I am not that type. All right. It is as if, it is a personality, right? You belong to, you have certain characteristics, and that's just you. We accept it as it is because we see the behaviors. Oh, she's just a shy type, right? She's not sociable. But what is driving all of that? What is driving the dislike of books, for example? That or the liking of physical activities, or the shyness. So behaviors actually has a deeper driver, right? So when we see behaviors that, oh, they are very interested in this, but not that. And these are behaviors that we observe, then we attribute it to kind of like interest, motivation, and personality. But what is driving that behavior, if you dig a little bit deeper, is actually our cognitive or brain skills. I'll just share, an experiment with you. It's quite a recent experiment where scientists were looking at very young babies. So these were about 1-year-old children, and scientists gave them blocks to play with. I don't know whether it's Lego kind of blocks, but it was blocks. And blocks, it's a good toy. It's an educational toy. Why? Because playing with blocks requires you to visualize, right? So it builds up the visual senses, the spatial senses, which supports math learning, right? As we have briefly discussed earlier. So it's an educational toy. But when they had these 1-year-old infants play with the blocks, the scientists saw very different behaviors. So some babies were really interested. They would look at the blocks for a longer duration. They would try and handle it, do something about it. There was interest. Yeah, they would engage. So the scientists measured the duration of time. So they basically just measured for each child, how long were they looking at it, handling it, engaging with it, yeah? But there were babies who crawled away after a short duration. So they already see differences, right? So if we are just watching in as a layperson, we'll say, wow, my baby is interested in blocks. Oh, but my baby is not interested in blocks. As if, it's like their personality, right? So of course, why would babies already have different such differences towards an educational toy? Is a good thing, right? But some babies were not interested. So the scientists then took the babies into the lab and measured, look at the brain pattern, right? And they realized that the children who spend more time, showing interest in the blocks actually showed more activity in the visual processing area. So actually, what's driving this interest is because the brain's already more fit. That muscle is able to make sense of this little thing a bit more for the baby, right? So the baby is trying to see what else can I do, trying to learn about it. And they certainly registered more visual activity compared to the babies who were not interested. So there was a direct correlation between duration of engagement and level of brain activity. So we can see that the brain, at the initial, right, whatever we have with the genes, right, then the environment starts to come in, right? They're all impacting the brain, including behaviors at a very young age. Now, I think it's important for parents and useful, for us to know some of these, because if you're a mother, you have a new baby, you bought a set of blocks, you have your baby played with it, but your baby wasn't interested. Maybe you try, a second time, a third time, a fourth time, and your child, still didn't show any interest. So what would you as a loving mother do? I would pack the toys away, right? Maybe my baby doesn't like blocks. I'll look at what my baby likes, soft toys. Then maybe I buy more soft toys. But if we now know that, a lack of interest, the behavior could be driven by a lesser brain activity, And the fact that the brain is like a muscle, so we have opportunities, especially in the early years, to build it up, then this baby actually needs to play with blocks even more, right? To catch up with the baby who's already playing. But of course, we never force our children. Now, the better question for parents would be, wow, okay, my baby doesn't like blocks. I know it's important. It's building the math brain. Now, what can I do, to help my baby play, be more successful, to enjoy this game, right? Maybe I need to get smaller blocks, bigger blocks. We don't know. We have to kind of, analyze a little bit, but not put the blocks in the storeroom, because the moment you do that, then the practice opportunity goes away. And that's how interest is shaped by the original, genetic difference, but very quickly by the environment as well, because we tend to gravitate, the child and also the adults, towards what the child is naturally inclined to go to, and then we move away from what they are not. Whereas, there's an opportunity to actually build up the areas that are not so strong. All right. So that's a big discussion on interest. How about a learning difficulty? Could John have ADD, ADHD? Yes, you need a diagnosis, to see John very well could have ADHD or ADD. But we also know that there are many, many students and children without a formal diagnosis, but they do not pay attention well as well, right? The brain is not categorical. It's not like you are gifted, you are normal, or you have a learning disability. It's not categorical. It's in a small, like a spectrum. We all fall somewhere in a spectrum between most attentive to least attentive. We're all somewhere, right? Somebody with ADD, ADHD just happen to be at the weaker end, right? And the cutoff, all right, is medically kind of like defined, right? So that doctors, beyond a certain point can prescribe medication, right? But the reality is that you may not fall in that diagnostic criteria, right, category, but you may still have attention, all right? And the last point, all right, lacking of certain brain skills, and that's certainly something that, we want to talk a little bit more, what are the skills really, the brain skills. Now, brain skills are a complex thing. They are very, very important, but they're invisible, they're hidden. We don't see it as a skill, right? But it is reflected in your behavior, in other areas, in your block, in playing with blocks or a soft toy. It shows your behavior, but by itself, it's not kind of like, oh, you have great memory skill, right? We just say that, oh, he learns spelling well, or he's a fast learner. We comment on the behavior, not on the skill. So, but brain skills or cognitive skills, these are just different terms. We can also call them pre-academic skills, right? So often when you talk about pre-academic skills, people tend to think of preschoolers, sitting still, holding the pencil. But actually, there are important pre-academic cognitive skills. They're invisible, but they're like the roots. They support learning, right? So processing speed, working memory, attention span, sensory motor coordination, logical thinking, all these kind of invisible but very important pre-academic, because they influence academic in a major way, right? They influence reading, writing, learning, behavior in the classroom, up to your 21st century skills, creative thinking, critical thinking. When you boil down to the foundation of these cognitive brain skills, pre-academic skills, whatever we call them, they are important, and we should look a little bit more at them, yeah? Now, this is just a quick comment about these important skills, and this is taken from Harvard Center on the Developing Child. So this was actually the scientists releasing a paper to preschool teachers. I sort of copied and paste, a couple of sentences, yeah? Learning to control impulses, pay attention, and have good memory does not happen automatically as children mature. So children who have problems with these skills will not necessarily outgrow them. This is just a comment for people who think, it's an age thing, it's a maturation thing. But scientists have found that if you tend to have weak skills, right, some of these brain skills, pre-academic skills, when you're young, right, when you're older, yes, you will become better yourself than when you were younger. But if you were weaker compared to your peers, right, at an older age, you still tend to be weaker compared to your peers. So you're not able to catch up. And the reasons is because of what we have already discussed. It's because the brain is like a muscle. For children, babies who already have good attention span, they will spend more time doing quiet activities. And you know what? The brain is a muscle. The more they do that, their attention builds more and more. The children who are already good at visualizing blocks, they play with blocks more, their visual systems get built more and more. Children who are already weaker, they tend to do the minimum, right? They don't pay attention as much. They like quick changes, right? They might not like blocks and they play minimally if we don't intervene. And that muscle then doesn't have the opportunity to catch up, right? So these gaps, you know, and this is what scientists have seen, right? By following children over as the developmental ages, the problems don't seem to go away, right? So it's important that we understand them in a bigger way. So that's a discussion of the first part. Now, let's look at the second part, right? So the first is kind of examine some common beliefs of what we think is going on in our brain, at least in children's behaviors, right? What's driving that? Now, let's look at the attention system and examine why is this activity, this behavior so difficult. Now, I want to talk about some core brain muscles. Again, I just use the term muscle quite loosely. Yeah, they're not muscle cells, but the brain behaves like that. So again, I have simplified to 5 main areas. Focus, the big now the brain is oriented the other way. Eyes at the front, the back is right here because this bum is here. So visual is now here. Movement or your spatial sense is here. Language is always at the side. Focus at the front. Emotions at the middle. Now, these are your brain muscles, cognitive skills, pre-academic skills, whatever, but they influence learning. That is what we know. Now, the reason why paying attention is so hard is because while we kind of label the front part your focus brain, and indeed many focus behaviors are moderated here, the reality is that in order to focus, you need every single area to be really quite fit, right? And we're just going to look at that. Therefore, it's a demanding cognitive or mental activity to pay attention because all areas need to be functioning optimally. Visual pre-academic skills. You want to focus on a book, your eyes, just something simple, right? Your eyes need to move left to right and stay on left to right. There are some children whose eyes, the skill, they don't have that fluent left to right, line by line ability, right? The skill's lacking. And here, you know, I just took it off the site of Children's Vision Information Network, where they're showing a very serious example, right? Just this is a very serious case where a child who might be reading, the eyes might be jumping everywhere. And of course, reading becomes hard. It's tedious, right? To guide your eyes back again and again, compared to another child who might be absolutely fluent, right? Then attention span's already different. If the child simply has different eye tracking skills, one child will be having shorter attention span, a lot more careless than the other child, right? So already we can see vision can impact attention span. So some symptoms, right? Some signs, possibilities that indicate that, you know, it could be a weak pre-academic skill area in the visual area. Could be a child who may not have good attention span, but also dislike coloring as a young child. Somebody who may have untidy handwriting, or not enjoy reading and writing because there's demand, you know, on some of these visual processing. The child who's careless, the child who doesn't like math. We talk quite a bit now about the relationship between the visual, spatial sense and math, right? So math is a very spatial subject, big or small, tall or short. It's a lot of these concepts are around space. Chinese characters are a lot more pictorial, so there's a lot more demand on the visual processing. You might be slow in copying from the blackboard, you might have slow reaction times, you might not like ball sport. Even social skills could also be affected because you don't pick up nonverbal cues easily, and of course, short attention span, yeah? Auditory, let's look at sound. How do we, kind of process information that's coming in through the ears? Language, people who are teaching us, our teachers, right? I want you to listen to this. Yep.
Say.
Right, I'll play that again. You hear a sound.
Say.
A word for the top.
Say.
A word for the bottom. I'm sure, you know, you would have heard say at the top and stay at the bottom. Totally different words. Different meanings altogether. Now, this is a sound wave pattern of say, right? Say and stay they are quite different, but at the vibrational level, and we know that sounds travel through wave patterns, right? The difference between a say and a stay is 100 milliseconds of silence. Consonant sounds, t, k, g, they are very short. It's about 40, 50 milliseconds, right? So by just inserting a silence gap of 100 milliseconds here, you create a new consonant, t or t, right? In this case, it's a T, right? Stay. And so we now know that your auditory brain has a big job. It's got to process information rapidly, right? So there's a concept called rapid auditory processing. So if the child's brain is not so fit, right, it's not able to kind of like grab that milliseconds, that little minute sound pattern, listening is going to be tedious. They're going to say, what? Huh? Say it again. They're going to be checking. And it's tedious, right? Because it's not that the children, don't understand, right? It's just that I take more effort to listen in and to follow. Is that going to exhaust attention system? Absolutely. It's like if you go to a foreign country or you watch a foreign movie, right? And you're checking because you don't have that fluency compared to another child who's already, in the next paragraph, perhaps. Yeah. So auditory could be impacting. Some symptoms, a young infant who spoke late, so kind of 18 months, you want at least 30 words, yeah? Have difficulty with reading and comprehension. So anything that's dealing with language is kind of like the auditory area, right? So the auditory brain deals with language information, reading, writing, yeah? So a child who seems to hear but not listen, they are forgetful, especially learning spelling. Yeah, spelling is very much into your auditory and visual memory as well. Difficulty with math, but this time word problems. Yeah, if you have lengthy sentences, you have to process the language, then there's an added demand. Have difficulty with verbal expression, difficulty following lengthy verbal discussion, and obviously, short attention span, because it's just loading the effort, yeah, into doing something which should be a lot easier. And again, the way we should understand is not whether, you have this problem. We are all in a spectrum somewhere. So you might be very fit in visual, but not so fit in auditory. We're all somewhere, all of us, yeah. And yeah, so it's not so much of, categorical. Now, another area, so emotional pre-academic skills. What are we talking about? Mindsets, right? So if you start school with fixed mindsets, your brain is giving you statements like either I can do it or I can't. Truly smart people do not need to work hard. Or mistakes are bad. They show I'm bad. If you have this self-talk that's going on in a young child's brain, how ready is that child to begin their formal, long learning journey years? Right? The mindset's not there, right? And compared to another child who's entering school, right, or in school now thinking, I can always do better. Effort is necessary for success. Mistakes show me where I can improve. It's okay, right? I can always be better. Now, certainly that child is a lot more ready to learn. And this internal self-talk distracts us or encourages and motivates us. So that's a reality. So many pieces need to come in, which is why paying attention and staying focused, right? It's hard, right? It depends on the task. So if it's a reading task and I happen to have great auditory language brain, I may enjoy it. But if it's a math task and I happen to have weak visual processing, then I may not enjoy it or not pay attention to that. So when you have these behaviors, right, we really need to look at what's the child not focusing on. What do we want to build? Now, take a step back rather than describing these as a personality or blaming the child for being lazy, right? Maybe there are certain brain drivers that's causing that behavior to manifest. All right, so some weak emotional pre-academic skills, low tolerance for frustrations, the child's not motivated, have negative mindset, they might give up easily, not like challenging activities, not cope well with mistakes because they're saying that, mistakes are bad, take feedback and criticisms negatively, they might be easily anxious or not cope well with stress, have weak social skills and empathy, have short attention and span, and also longer term focus, right? Because if you have that mindset that, oh, I'm just not smart enough. It's not me, right? I mean, whether the immediate attention or even worse, like the long term, I'm going to do this. I'm going to graduate and I'm going to, be in this field. That's going to be hard as well to be positive and upbeat about that. All right, so that would be the second part. So the first part, we talked about the different beliefs about why children behave in an inattentive way. The second part was really more understanding the drivers at the brain level. Again, these are hidden skills. Many people, we don't know. I don't know, my auditory memory. And I know that, I might like to talk, or I like to write and read, right? But they're hidden, right? We only know that, oh, I enjoy certain thing, or I do not. But the reality is that these skills are just in our brain and driving our behaviors, towards or away from the different tasks. Now, let's get to the strategies. So what are some what do we do? Right? So if my child's not able, not interested, or what are some of good parenting ideas, right, to improve attention span? My tip number one: cultivate delayed gratification, right? I think a lot of people would have heard of the marshmallow test, the very, very famous marshmallow test, which is really old. So just to summarize, in case you have not heard of it, this experiment was conducted in Stanford University. And this was really quite a long time ago, 50, 60 years ago, right? Where they had preschoolers come into the lab and they put marshmallows in front of them. And the instruction that was given was that you can choose to eat a marshmallow now, or you can choose to wait. And so then the researcher would tell them that they have to step out for a while. And if they could wait until the researcher come back, they would actually get 2 marshmallows, right? So do you want 1 now, or do you want to wait and get 2 later? So different children behave in different ways, so these were little pictures of kids who are trying, not to look at it so they don't get tempted. So some kids waited very well. They struggled, right? But they managed to control their urges, right? They were able to delay, they were able to delay their gratification and not be immediately satisfied, right? And then other kids couldn't wait, right? They just could not deal with whatever emotions that they're having. I want to eat it now, and I want to eat it right now, right? And so they would just eat it. But and when the scientists followed up with these children many, many years down the road, and they found that whether a child was successful in waiting or not actually had a direct correlation with how they were doing as adults in terms of their happiness levels, in terms of their pay, the salary. Kids who waited had better paying jobs by the time they were adults. They were in relationships, more healthy relationships, versus the group of kids who couldn't wait, right? So there was it was a very significant study. Obviously it is something that is a skill that is important. So the ability to stay calm, not rush in, and wait. Why is this important for focus? Because at the root of a child losing attention is really the frustration. I'm just not interested anymore. I don't want to do this. I want to watch TV, whatever. I want to go outside and play right now, right? I'm just not going to spend another minute here, so I'm distracted, right? Or I go into my daydreaming world, right? And so if you have a child who's able to say, I'm frustrated, right? But you know what? I'm just going to deal with this emotion, right? I'm going to give myself strategy, like in this case, a child closing the eye. Then that child is going to have more skills and resource to stay on the task when they find that it's challenging. Say, I don't have certain, cognitive or brain skills to do a certain task. It is effortful. Like my eyes need to focus extra hard, right? My feeling is that I want to give up. But if you are able to say, look, let me just finish, I'm going to enjoy later. So that waiting ability, right, is one part of the brain. It's self-control, right? It helps in a child staying put, even though I feel like I want to stop doing this task, which is really the attention issue, right? Where you are just drifting off or you want to drift off. You no longer want to engage. So parents should see waiting as an exercise, not as a waste of time. And I say this because we are in an instant world, right? we are all getting impatient. We send a message, we expect somebody to respond immediately, right? And we're always checking things, waiting. Yeah, I think we're losing our ability to wait, right? So waiting is good, and we see that from the Stanford results, right? So if we're able to cultivate that, develop delayed gratification as a household value, like we're all going to kind of like save up for the trip, save up for the movie, right? And parents can model that. So if you're a parent and you're the child sees you, oh, I have, I see a new gadget in the market, and the next thing is I've gone to buy it, right? I can't wait, right? And then the children are going to have, that kind of model, right? And waiting really, when you're waiting, you're actually exercising the frontal part of the brain, right? So it is the executive is self-control, and is really linked to not only immediate attention span, but also the longer term focus, especially that, right? You stay on your project. I don't want to do it anymore, but I'm still making myself stay on it, right? To finish it. So that's something that research has shown that it's valuable, especially in our world that has become faster and faster, right? We no longer, send a fax, and wait for 2 days for somebody to fax back, or snail mail, in the olden days. I think the frontal lobes will probably be a bit stronger in those areas. If a child is frustrated, they just don't want to do, certain thing anymore. You want to help them manage the frustration by having the child articulate the desired behavior. I need to finish my homework before going to the playground. Now, just the very act of saying it, right? You are kicking in certain pathways of thinking, right? Just articulating speech. I need to finish my work. What is the goal, right? I'll finish, then I'll go to the playground, right? So that itself, right, is able to calm the emotions, because when your frontal lobe comes in, your emotion centers, all the frustration, like this is too boring, I want to get out, let's not do this anymore. Yeah, so it quietens those signals. So articulating helps. All right. Now, the other thing I think is important, especially in relation to our current world. Now, this attention topic, I think, is a huge topic. I'm just really giving you some ideas, some points of view about this very big conversation that we could have. So the second tip I would say is, I think every child should be taught how their brain works. And I really say this with huge conviction. I have a 5-year-old, and you will hear her talking about, the different parts of the brain. And the reason why it's important is because they need to know. Gadgets is one thing. We talk about gadgets, right? The amount of time you're spending in front of the TV, in front of the iPad, right? Or if you're multitasking for teens, right? What is that really doing to your brain, right? Do you know, right? I mean, it is doing something to your brain. I mean, and for gadgets, if it's overuse of social media, especially, it's not positive, yeah? Sleep. Do you know that, sleeping on enough or not, right? Staying up late into the night might be not the best for your brain, not just attention, right? Different areas as well, but certainly big impact on attention span. How about food? Drinking your soft drinks, your sugar-loaded kind of food. What's that doing to your brain than having a healthy food, right? So these are certainly some topics that we have in our curriculum. But I think, especially if you have a child by elementary school, mid-elementary, I almost think that all schools should make it as compulsory, kind of like, I don't know what subject it would be, but to really understand how we can all be more effective, healthier, right? Happier, perhaps more successful. I mean, it affects not just learning, if we have poor attention, right? Our relationships, yeah? So I think it's important to understand what is actually influencing our capabilities to relate successfully, to learn successfully, to attend, to focus, yeah? Because they have real life consequences. So read books about the brain. I highly encourage that. Talk about the brain. Use brain talk. Now, this is something I really like. Often parents will say to children, what is wrong with you? Why are you always not paying attention? Why are you so emotional? I mean, and So the issue is the child. So we're saying that what is wrong with you? Something is wrong with you as a child, right? And that's not the most constructive for relationship, because I mean, parents, if you're a parent or a teacher, kids look up to us, right? And we're always telling the children that they're precious, they're perfect in our eyes, right? And they always will be, whatever behavior or short attention span that they have. So what I really find could be useful is to change the conversation and say, let's comment on the brain's ability that's causing this behavior. Let's not make the child own it, but we're going to make the brain, and it is the brain that's driving that. So let's help your brain pay attention, right? It's the brain that's not paying attention now. My child's perfect, you're fine, but you know what? We need to help your brain here. It's a muscle, right? I mean, it's just a muscle, right? We need to build up. It's just like I have weak biceps. Like I need to go to the gym, right? Let's put away that toy. Let's help your brain a little bit, right? It's getting too distracting. Is there anything we can do together to help your brain concentrate better? So now the target is the brain, not the child, right? And I think that could be nice for the child, right? So that they are kind of like not the culprit there. Can we help your brain calm down with some deep breathing exercises, right? So kind of like steering it towards talking about the brain. Try that. I think it might be useful. Now, the last tip, right, I would be talking about its actual training up of these skills. Now, if these are muscles, can we train them up? Yes, and this is the other finding from the research labs. So this is another view of our skills, right? So I broadly talk about the movement, visual, auditory, emotions, and focus centers. But the reality is that there are many, many sub-skills and also interconnection. The brain is truly a very complex organ, but you have clusters of skills that are really pre-academic. I mean, you want to learn well, to start off learning well, to be successful. And this pre-academic, don't be misguided, right? It doesn't mean it's relevant to preschoolers. We can have a much older child come in who is really not enjoying school, and some of these pre-academic skills is just really skills that support learning of academics, mastery of that is not there. So it's not an age-dependent thing, yeah, and of course there are higher level skills, there are more executive self-management. So certainly for the older people, we are looking at more of that, but they are interconnected as well, right? They build on top of each other. So how do we build that? I'm just going to share, with our philosophy. We get results. We're happy with our results. Certainly for us, the very first step is we want to know the child, because every brain is so different. So different children, the behavior is they're not attentive, but the drivers could be very different. One child, it could be eye focus and tracking. Another child, it could be auditory. Another child, it could be emotional, for the reasons that I've described earlier. We have a cognitive profiling process. So we actually spend an hour kind of understanding the child and measuring each of these areas. So they'll be doing, different movement exercises or app-based exercises. And then we get a report that looks at each of this cluster. So if parent is saying, look, I have this behavior, then we try and look under the hood a little bit, right? Like, what are the drivers? These hidden skills, yet, they are important, could be contributing to that behavior. Yeah. So that for us is very important. Otherwise, we will just be guessing. Just going onto a program, right? I mean, if you need auditory, but, it's a visual part that you need more to be trained up, then, we might not get as quick or strong results as we want. When we talk about training, we follow a simple rule, 5 + 3 = 8, right? Now, while each of this brain area has got its job, there's interconnection is very, very important as well, because the brain's constantly talking, sending signals from one area to the other. So the networks are really important. So at BrainFit, we, at whatever age, we want to build up, if certain areas are weak, we target them, but we have many activities that's really crossing, building up the interconnectivity as well, right? So that's the 5. Now, the 3 proven methods, right? Physical training, cognitive training, emotional coaching. I get a common question: who has proven that? Scientists, all right? Scientists have shown that by engaging in physical activity that are well designed, right, you can improve just aerobic activity, right, can actually already be healthy for the brain. But if you design them in a way to target, for example, attention span, spatial sense, then they become even more powerful. So we will do little activities like that. So different children, depending on their levels, would have different tailored exercises. Cognitive training, so they could be on app exercises that's targeting either visual, auditory, or different focus areas, memory areas that we want to work on. Yeah, so that's that. Again, very personalized. Sorry. The child, and we have emotional coaching and mindfulness kind of work. Teach the child, how to manage that through a curriculum and also exercises like that. And by the way, if you do want to look at some of the movement activities that we use, we have a resource page, resources.brainfitstudio.com. You can see some of our videos there as well. And we'll be putting up the links for you later as well. Okay, now the other thing I want to talk about with the three methods, it's an important 80-20 rule, right? So scientists have also discovered that if you're able to train at the level where the difficulty, where the child struggles, such that 80% the child can do, but 20% the child is still struggling, right? So that is an optimal level of difficulty, right? So we follow that very closely. So for every child, every session, we are really looking at where's your 80-20. And then we drill you, we exercise, kind of lift the mental weights, right? Until you can lift that, then we make it kind of just 20% harder. So we create that gap again. And by that, we stretch the brain. Very similar to training the body, right? You incrementally increase the weights and have the individual lift until the muscle is bulked up, then you add the weights. Yeah. So there's certain rules that guide training. And for you as a parent, right, what's the strategy? So if you're giving your child worksheets, right, if they're scoring about 8 out of 10, it's a good worksheet, right? But if they're getting 10 out of 10 all the time, it's probably too easy. But if they're getting 5 to 6 out of 10, it's probably too hard. They will lose motivation, and then you will find that they're not really focusing on doing that. So around 8 to 10 is your brain's learning sweet spot. And the 8, we use SMARTers as an acronym to really indicate all the great skills that we want our kids to have. We want speed. We want you to, be fast, have good memory, pay attention, be able to reason, good timing and coordination. And EST would be your emotional skills. Manage your own emotions, have good social skills, and be resilient, all right? Tenacity. We have published papers, in Singapore that has shown that academic results have improved. And this is a boys' school in Singapore where we had a control group who didn't train. So this project happened between term 1 and term 2, and we compared, the results in the two groups. These were primary 1 to primary 3 students. And we found that the group who trained by the end of the year compared to the control group per child had more improvement. Look at math. The blue is the math, improvement. There was 4% in our control group versus about 50% per child. And we didn't give math tuition. It was really, and the reason why math had been impacted so much was because it was just one term and we had focused on visual spatial training. We also have a published paper more recently, 2017 in Journal of Education and Practice. So these are our Turkey partners through a university. So they looked at using brain fit mind exercises on attention span of primary school kids in Turkey. And they found that we were able to improve the attention skills. Yeah. And a short video of a child, talking about his own experience of exercising, the brain. It's just a short video for you.
I got more memories, like suddenly a lot of memories come stuck in my mind, even though I learned it like 2 years, 3 years, 4 years ago, still stucking up in my mind. And then I also can focus more, like if I got a test and then I got like my friends playing, I'm like just gonna, I'm gonna do this test first and then I'm gonna play. It's like let's say self-control. I self-control too. BrainFit also teach me self-control because they teach me how to control my emotions. Once I was stuck at my scores were dropping. It was 55, 69, 68, and then because I never give up, I believe in my dreams, and I wish, and do BrainFit all the time. I say to my mother, "Mom, I want a break," but of BrainFit. But luckily, my mother didn't give me. So yeah, suddenly my scores improved. My math from 70, 70, 70, 70, 71, 81 becomes 197. You should never give up on your kid. Nick Fujific, he was doesn't have the 4 limbs, but he become great. He thought I'm never gonna get married, never gonna get a good job, never gonna get successful, but he did, cause he never gave up. Parents still, even if your kid has problems, you need to help them. Spend a little bit more time with them, teach them how to do this, do that, and encourage them every time. If they fail, tell them to try again and try again and try again.
Yeah, so this is just the experience of a student, so it is a muscle that can be picked up, and we get encouraged, by really some of these stories as well. So I've come to the end of the session, so hopefully it's given you some ideas. Now, before I take questions, maybe we just probably have time for a little bit. I know there are more questions, so what we have decided to do this year is that we are now on the Clubhouse app every Wednesday. So if you're not aware of the Clubhouse app, is an audio kind of conversational app, right? It's currently only on Apple phones. But if you do have an Apple phone, you download the app. We are every Wednesday, 9 to 10 p.m. Singapore time. We will be online for an interactive chat. In fact, we've already scheduled for next Wednesday. So do follow me, right? In case you can't find a room, I'm Cheryl.Chia in the app, and join us, right? So next Wednesday at 9 to 10, we're going to discuss further, and if some of the questions that I'm unable to take tonight, right? And we're going to, answer some of them over there. And it's great because webinar is very one way, and we really want interactivity, to hear, all, everyone else's experience as well. So do join us, and it's something that we're excited about having, so that we can continue these conversations, a little bit more engagement, from all of you, yeah? Please help us to give us some feedback so that we can do better by filling up this feedback form. And in the feedback form, you also have options to sign up if you want to know more about BrainFit specific programs, if you're interested in a cognitive profile or other programs, and we have specials because of your participation in these webinars. We do offer that, complimentary consultation and upcoming webinars as well. Just with the upcoming events, in 2 weeks' time, on 24th of March, Wednesday, but it's 9 a.m. unfortunately, because Paula is on a US time, right? She will be talking about improving educational outcomes by enhancing perceptual, cognitive, and language skills in students. Now, Paula is highly, highly credentialed. She's actually one of the ladies who presented to the US Congress, on dyslexia and how the government should be supporting kids with dyslexia. So she's a big expert in language, if you're interested and are available. If you can't make it because it's work hours, then, watch out for our videos. And on the 8th of April, again, at this time, right, I will be talking, but this time about baby brain stimulation, right? Answering some common facts and myths about flashcards, baby Mozart, or leave them alone. So if you, friends or yourself have a young child, do join us for that session. Yeah, so I will stop share and perhaps just take a couple of questions. Yeah, and again, I'm sorry if I can't get to all the questions. I have gone over a little bit, and but perhaps we can continue the chats at the Clubhouse. Nancy.
All right, thank you, Cheryl, for the thorough explanation. We have a few questions here. There's one from Maria Cherry Butanas. So she's asking, how do we disengage our teens from too much screen time? They're into full online learning daily at the moment, and after class they do their performance tasks, and then afterwards they do online games, watch animes, or read online stuff. So definitely more than 8 hours a day. Can this be an addiction already? And I wonder, I'm adding this one. What does that have any effects on their attention?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. We actually had a whole webinar talking about online learning, and we were addressing, some of these long amount of hours that kids are spending on the screen. Now, it's really important for everyone to know that the worry about the screen and attention span is not the gadget, it's not the screen itself. Of course, when a child is, in front of a screen for extended duration, the biggest fear is actually vision. It is close vision. It's just like if you are reading the whole day, right? You need to be looking out, otherwise you get short-sighted. So that is the immediate issue of kids who spend a long time in front of the screen, right? What then affects attention span is actually content, right? It's not the gadget, it's not the computer, right? It's the content. So we separate content. There's educational content, and then there's entertainment content. So what an entertainment would include social media, right? YouTube videos, anything that is just kind of like entertaining you through the screen, video games, yeah? Whereas educational content would be like your classes. So no, if you're attending class through the computer, you don't become addicted. In fact, the kids will be happy when it stops, right? You don't worry about addiction because it is really the entertainment media and social media that what scientists are concerned about. So it's not the gadget, number one. It's not the absolute duration on the gadget. It is really the content. It's like me, I'm on the computer a lot. We're working, but we don't end up with attention problems because when we are working, when you're attending class, your brain is focusing, or at least trying to, for our children, right? And they're listening, they're learning. So the brain is actually working hard. So kids don't like online class. They like, what is addictive are screen activities that give a lot of pleasure, releases a lot of pleasure chemicals. When you play computer games, right, it's giving you all these boosters. When you level up, right, you have all these dopamine spurts, which is your pleasure neurotransmitters in the brain. So that becomes, that drives addiction, and then kids get to spend more and more time, and potentially, depending on what kind of media they are engaged in, it could then potentially create attentional issues. Okay, so it's not just that, but of course, I mean, you're bringing up another a very important discussion. I mean, the kids are spending a lot of time sedentary, and being sedentary is not good for attention span. All right. So it's not the gadget itself. So if my child is sitting all day doing coloring and reading, I will tell them, get up. I will, even if they're doing kind of healthy activities, I will say, enough, go outside. I mean, sedentary activities are not great, right? We are made to move. Our brains thrive and become more nourished when we have movement. So yes, the online environment, because of the COVID, I think could have an impact because of the increased levels of being sedentary. I think more than because it's the gadget. Yeah. So I hope that answered the question.
Yes.
So
question. Yeah. Parents need to be more intentional, I guess. Yeah. In looking for that. Physical activities, they need to move more.
Yes. Movement is great for the brain, right? Mood regulating, attention and focus. You can have an immediate elevation of focus just by getting the child to do 50 star jumps, right? So I think if you're an online teacher, your kid's spending a lot of time online, a lot of movement breaks, even more so than an ordinary classroom will be what I recommend. Maybe one more question?
Yes, thank you. Maybe we have time for one more. Yes.
Yeah, maybe just the last one. Sorry to hold everybody back.
Yes. So this one comes in before the webinar. How come my child has selective focus? He's very attentive when doing tasks that he likes to do. But when it comes to studying and doing schoolwork, his attention goes out of the window.
I am sure that is an absolutely common question. We get that almost like every day, right? Okay. You just go back to fundamental principle. Go back to the experiment of the baby playing with the blocks, right? It's really not is not study or something else, right? It is any task, right? If your brain has the muscles that is strong enough, right, for you to be able to handle that task and successful. Now, success in learning drives motivation, right? I just attended a lecture, right? People are always thinking, we need more motivation. Then it drives learning. The scientist was saying, no, learning, successful learning drives motivation. We always got to think about prepping the child for success, that if they can acquire skills, right, that's when your reward, your dopamine is released, the pleasure chemicals. Yeah. So when a child is selective, I would say that I'm selective, right? I don't like to cook, right? But I like to read, okay? So if you measure me, I may have less eye-hand coordination, so that when I'm cutting, I'm not good at that. I'm always worried about, I put a lot of effort in, right? I may not be very motorically inclined, but I could read a book, right? Because my brain is prepped for that. So children, right? If they are not interested in studies, we need to see, right? I mean, or we have other questions like they're interested in English but not math, or they like math but they hate language, right? Like, what is wrong with them? So it's always looking at the task, right? What does the task require? Study. What does it require? It requires you to pay attention. It requires you to understand the teacher, understand what you're reading. Now, are those roadblocks for the child? Is that why the child is unable to have the pleasure chemicals when he's studying, when he's reading? Because it's so much effort and he doesn't really understand, right? So whereas he's gravitated to computer games, right? So maybe his visual is really good and he's leveling up with all these shooting games. And of course, we all want to go where we do well, right? Because I can tell you children who hates computer games, right? They don't like it. They find it stressful. So if you look at them, some of them don't have the speed or the eye-hand coordination. They rather do coloring or something sedentary, art and craft, right? So it's not about, it's really about the breakdown of that desired activity and the brain muscles, right? That's such that when they interact, like the baby looking at the blocks, there was no pleasure for some babies. They crawled away. But there was pleasure for other babies because the visual brain was actively trying to figure out. So yeah, that would be the way I approach a selective attention, So rather than the child choosing, I think the child is driven by these invisible, hidden, but very, very important skills. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Cheryl. So if a parent wants their child to love learning, then they need to strengthen the brain muscles for learning, right?
Yes. And learning really requires all, your eyes got to track, you're going to have spatial for math, you got to be, have auditory for language. Yes, our academic system, unfortunately, for kids, who are strong in the visual auditory areas, they are very, it's easier for them. For kids who those areas are not so strong, it could be a disadvantage.
All right. Yes.
Yeah.
So I think, thank you for the answer, Cheryl.
No problem. I will go back to,
The feedback form?
Yes, the feedback form.
Yes. All right. So
thank you.
Come to the end of the webinar. Yes, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We will be keeping the webinar on for another 2 minutes so that everyone can access the feedback form. You can continue filling up the form when the webinar has ended. You can find the link in the chat or the QR code on the screen. All right. And then if you would like to sign up for our next webinar, the links are also provided in the chat, as well as the resources. You can sign up to our newsletter to access the resources that we hope that can be useful for you.
Yep. And join us on Clubhouse next Wednesday.
Oh, yes.
Sorry, I saw there's quite a few questions. Sorry, I didn't have time. It's a lot of information, but do join us to continue the discussion. It's a huge topic, very interesting, very important for our children and our students. Yeah.
Yes. Maybe Clubhouse is now currently only available on iPhones, right? But just, maybe for Android users, if you have an iPad, that also works too. Yes, do join us on Clubhouse.
Yeah, again, follow me, or any of our hosts, Nancy, Irfan, Ayu, they'll be there as well. And yeah, if you can follow them, then you will be notified of our events in case you can't find our room. Because I think the search is it's still a new app. I don't think the search is that great, for the discussion rooms, in my opinion. All right.
Right. Thank you.